Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. Here with the last part, third part of going through Batman comics and trying to fix what I believe is broken in the Batman comic books right now. I say this as a Batman fan, as someone who buys basically every Batman comic book that comes out. But this is more talking about the mainline Batman title, Detective Comics, and just some issues that I think have kind of built up in the last couple of years with Batman. First part of this, I talked a bit about the Bat family, where I think there's way too many characters. They're way too at odds with Bruce. Their personalities seemingly are too different. And I think a great example of that came from this week's, I believe it was Batman 161, where you had another kind of disaster issue with Hush 2. More Bat family strife and all that kind of stuff that I think has just become so repetitive. Second piece, I talked a lot about the villains, how we're too repetitive. The villains have lost that sort of special flavor, even though they're still the greatest rogues gallery in all of comics, and how refreshing that a bit and putting some other players on the board might help. But the third part of this, I think, is addressing Batman himself as a character. And I think there are two huge issues happening with Batman right now that have become too prevalent in his comic books that have really hurt the character. And I think as a result of those two things, there's kind of a side effect that I think needs to get fixed as well. And so I say this again as Batman being my favorite fictional character of all time. I think when you look at the great Batman stories and the kind of the overrated Batman stories, there's a couple prevailing themes that I think hurt Batman as a character. And so the first one that I think hurts is a term that you often hear from the fans referred to as Bat God, right? The idea that Batman is more than a mortal man. We've even seen Tom King kind of have where they talk about and reference Batman as like a god, according to like how some people see him. And I think this has become the most harming thing in terms of Batman. Now, I love the idea of Batman as a brilliant strategist, as a guy who can, if you give him prep time, give almost anybody any chance. Right? He can overcome the odds. He can, find a way to defeat foes who are far more powerful than him. He's a brilliant strategist for the Justice League when they have to, maybe invade Apocalypse or something. He can come up with the plan. I love all of those things. And so I'm not saying to reduce the skill level of Batman. What I think the Bat God tendency that has to get rid of, though, is the idea that Batman would kick the crap out of Superman in a fight if he gave him 5 minutes. Is the fact that he, can build a suit that would take down the entire Justice League, as we've seen him do at times. The idea that Batman is just seemingly undefeatable in some of these circumstances, to me, ruins the character a little bit. The main appeal, as I only saw it, of Batman is this is a normal human being. He has, all the advanced skills that a human being can have. He is as strong as a human being can possibly be. He is as fast as a human being can possibly be. But at the end of the day, in the DC universe, where there are gods, where there are monsters, where there are Themysciran people and Thanagarian people and Green Lanterns and all these things, at the end of the day, he is a human being, a normal human being. This stretching of Batman's abilities to me breaks the character because the cool thing about Batman was that piece. I don't want a character who has powers. I don't want a character who is so seemingly overpowered at times. It sort of removes the drama of what makes Batman great. It was cool to watch him hang with the Justice League because you've got the superpowered Kryptonian and the Amazonian and the Green Lantern. And then here's just this guy in a bat costume who it doesn't matter that he shouldn't be there, he is because he is so skilled and so talented that he's earned it. And I think where we've seen this now is you look at media like the Injustice games, where basically it's a Batman can beat the entire Justice League sort of scenario, even though there's like Kryptonian technology that makes him strong and stuff like that in the games. There's all kinds of things that I think have just gone too far with Batman, and I think there's no better prevalence of this than him versus Superman in a fight. Batman versus Superman in a fight is a joke. Superman wins 1,000 times out of 1,000, and I say that as a Batman fan. I think with Batman, if you're going to have him fight opponents like Superman, it should be something like the original Hush did, where Batman's superior planning, his superior knowledge, his ability to survive, his ability to game plan, be a tactician, lets him delay Superman long enough to get Superman to wake up from whatever's caused him to be evil. I love that story in Hush, where basically he has the kryptonite ring and the sonic things, and he goes underground where it's lined with lead, and it's all a plot to get Catwoman to get Lois Lane because that will wake Clark up. That is how a Superman versus Batman fight should be. When they have these fights where it's Batman can literally build something that will let him kick the crap out of Superman, it just comes across as lame. I think it takes so much away from the character and it puts him in an echelon in terms of powers that he shouldn't be. Not because you don't want to see Batman be dominant or cool. It takes away what the character is. It takes away that human being who can get beaten and broken and battered and taking perseverance and overcoming the odds. And once you turn him into this godlike figure, all of that intrigue goes away. A Batman who can regularly kick the crap out of Superman should never be challenged by Two-Face or the Riddler or the Joker or any of these regular hoods in Gotham. Batman needs to be somebody where, yes, for a few minutes he can hang, he can plan with his advanced skills and things that he can survive a fight. But him winning a fight, him defeating the Justice League constantly, him having a plan where he can create something that neutralizes the Flash's speed or something like that. That's an interesting idea. But if the Flash, if he doesn't have that plan, he shouldn't be able to win a fight against the Flash. It takes so much from the character, and he ends up becoming the plot armor guy who can survive anything. And that, it's funny at times. I think there's that how it should have ended thing that always does that. I'm Batman is basically the explanation for everything. And I think there's moments that's cool, like when he disappears without being able to be noticed or sneaks into a place without being able to be noticed in a way that like surprises people. But I think once you start using it that he can survive being in the vacuum of space and he can beat up all these characters that he shouldn't in a straight up fight, it just makes no sense. It ruins the character, in my opinion. And I think they need to get back to where, yes, peak human being, incredibly fast, incredibly strong, incredibly smart, great tactician, great planner, great, he can be the tactical leader of the Justice League. But having him be where it's like, no, Batman can just beat up anyone is stupid. And I think we need to get back to a place where the character is more Batman, not Bat God. And I think that's a huge piece that's missing out of these comics that I think has been massively blown up in the last few years by writers. Second issue that I think needs to be dealt with Batman is it's again something fans often refer to as Bat Jerk, right? And this is this kind of condescending, jerky Batman being overly critical or overly negative in comic books to where they emphasize too much the darkness of the character. I think we saw this mostly executed in Zack Snyder's Justice League and his Batman versus Superman movie. Where, let's face it, unless you were a Batman fan coming in, he was a rather unlikable character. Torturing people, you know, being kind of cruel in the way he was doing things. And I know the plot of the movie was trying to show that had happened to him. But in all honesty, it was such a stark departure from who Batman should be. I think if you look at the great examples of Batman in media that people have really loved, and the comics that people love, it is a Batman who, yes, is dark, is brooding, is serious, but he is also still a man who has human emotions and can understand things. I think there's a quote out there: if you can't see Batman like consoling a child, you haven't written Batman, or if you can't write a Batman who does that, you haven't really written Batman. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. Batman has great moments in the comics that we all love the same way like Superman does. I think the Justice League cartoon where that character Ace is dying and Batman, instead of using the weapon on her, just sits with her until she goes. That's a great Batman moment. It's as cool a Batman moment as when he sneaks up on someone and delivers a cool one-liner. Batman is a character who, yes, is all these dark and broody things, but he also is someone who experienced trauma, experienced tragedy. And I love when they write those comic books where he's self-reflective and he cares about the Robins and he wants to be a good dad and he knows his internal, kind of problems that he has always makes him something different. But I think the idea that Batman wants to strive to be a better human being, strive to be nicer, he wishes he could be more like a loving father. He knows he can't ever get there. But I think that's more the Batman that we need. And I think we've seen such great examples of that and stuff like Young Justice, where, they had him defending Shazam being there when they're trying to kick him out. And Wonder Woman critiques him and is like, you put Dick Grayson in danger. And he basically says, no, I did that so that he didn't end up like me. And I think that's the approach that works better with Batman, where when he's constantly at odds with everybody, he's condescending people, he's always overly critical, written to be rude, written to be a jerk, written to be manipulative. It just toes over the line of where the character should be. Yeah, he can be edgy and he shouldn't be affable and laughing and the nicest guy ever. But I think there's so much critique of Batman that happens now just based on the fact that the jerk in the room is always going to be Batman. And yes, he can be the more serious one. He can be the one who doesn't laugh at the joke. He can be the one who doesn't want to, take part in the Justice League's, social events and things like that. That shouldn't be him. But you can't write the character where he comes across as emotionless, as a jerk, as a manipulative, kind of weird person where it's like, man, I don't like that guy. I think that's too far. And I think, yes, some of that's a little bit of the Frank Miller-esque kind of portion of the character that came in from The Dark Knight Returns. And look, I think in a one-off story like that, that's cool. But your mainline continuity Batman should be somebody who, yes, is more serious than Superman, yes, is more serious than Spider-Man, but is still someone who is a hero, who wants to do good, who wants to, help people. He'll console children when something happens to him. And I think that's the heart of the character, much more so than this weird kind of at times overly condescending personality that exists for Batman. And that just like we used to have the Adam West version of Batman be accurate, I think, we've had this weird kind of psycho-esque Batman kind of come into continuity. And I think you need to blend it. And I think like things like Batman the Animated Series, I'd say Christian Bale's Batman also did a good job of this as well. Of yes, he's serious, but he's nice, he's affable, he cares about people, he doesn't show it the greatest way. But Batman is a hero at the end of the day. And I hate when they often refer to him being dark as like he's an anti-hero. Batman's not an anti-hero. Batman doesn't, he breaks the laws in terms of the same way any other superhero does. But at the end of the day, he is a hero. He is a human being who will always do the right thing, who will do whatever he can to sacrifice for other people. And I think he got to write that jerk personality of him being the condescending jerk towards the other members of the Bat family, towards other superheroes, towards just regular civilians. You have to write that out of the character. You need to make him more aware. Yeah, he's serious, but he's a guy who cares. And I think if we lean into that a little more, the way that the Justice League series, the cartoon did, the way Batman the Animated Series did, I think you'll find a much better medium for Batman in terms of as a character, you'll hit a personality range that people connect to more. So I think those are the two biggest things, the whole Bat God and Bat Jerk thing that's referred to. I think thirdly, because of those two things, I think what has also happened is the big issue with Batman is the character needs to develop a little bit. And look, I'm a fan of somewhat stagnant characters. And when I say that, I mean where they are the character who kind of remains the same in a story and other people change around them because of them being in the story. But that doesn't mean the character's life circumstances can't change. And I think we've seen the mainline comics do this way too much. We have seen them wildly swing where, hey, we're going to take his money away. Okay, no, now he has the money again. Oh, we're going to take it away. Now he has it again. Oh, he was in charge of Wayne Enterprises. Now he's not. And that's not any kind of evolution of the character. It's just a temporary thing that, okay, for some reason in this issue, he lives in a brownstone instead of in Wayne Manor or something like that. Those aren't tangible changes to Batman. I think we saw Tom King actually get pretty close to this by having him almost marry Catwoman. Of course, they rug pulled that on all the fans and then reverted it back to form where it's the same exact status quo. And I think with Batman, they do need to do something to have the character grow a little bit. I think what I've loved about Philip Kennedy Johnson's run is they've actually had him investing more in being a dad. And I think that's really cool and that shows the character growing. He's always kind of been a father figure, but a writer actually exploring that makes that interesting. I think they should get Batman married. I don't know if it has to be Catwoman, but I think they could giving Batman a wife. I think Catwoman would be the perfect one. Would be a different dynamic. It wouldn't necessarily change the character, but would add something to the character where it does feel different, where it feels like, hey, this is a different era of storytelling. Because I think what's happened a little bit, and this is because there's so many Batman comic books that come out each month, When you have the character where he's stagnant and there's nothing that changes, it does start to feel too episodic in a way where it's just like, okay, yeah, pick that up. It's an adventure. And it's not bad, but it doesn't grow in the story. I think when you look at the great long term characters, he's one of the weird ones, and his circumstances haven't really changed. Superman has, gotten married. Superman has been a father. And that, yeah, some of that's all just the last 30 years. But there's a huge difference between the early Superman who's fighting his identity, and then Lois finds out, and then he marries Lois, and then him and Lois have a kid. That kind of marks the different eras of Superman. Spider-Man had this same thing, and I think we've seen him stagnate a little bit. And that once they took the marriage away from Mary Jane, it's not that the marriage to Mary Jane was what made the comic book interesting. It's that was the developmental piece of Peter Parker. That was him changing. That was him growing. With Batman, he's kind of just been in this same personality thing for too long. And I think having the character get married, or if you don't want to do that, have him become where he becomes the mayor of Gotham City, or he decides to use Wayne Enterprises in a different way, or you function on him being a CEO a little bit more, having him balance that a little bit. Something. Again, I don't think you need to overly break the character, but I think some life circumstances for Batman need to change. I was hopeful when Alfred was killed off in the comics, as much as I love Alfred, that would put Batman in a different role, that he'd have to do things differently. And for a little bit, I'll give James Tynion credit for the first, I think, 10 issues. He did explore some pretty cool things about how it was different. But as time went on, that kind of all went away. It just went to the same thing, just there's no butler at home to give him something soup wise or something. Like there's no butler to give him a meal or a lecture. I think you have to do something with Batman where you make his life circumstances change a little bit. Not break the character, not give him superpowers, not cut his arm off or something weird like that. But I do think they have to do something with he takes a public office, he becomes more of an impact at Wayne Enterprises, he, gets married, he moves something. You have to do something to make it seem like the character's evolving, because there's so many books that come out and he just seems stagnated in the same exact place. And that gets boring for folks at times. So I think you have to do that. I think if they do all of those things, it will change Batman a lot and make the character feel a bit more approachable and a bit more where the fans kind of can actually invest in the stories. And that I think the issue that we have with him almost more than any other character, despite that there's so many well-written books, and despite the fact that I'm someone who picks up 10 to 12 Batman books a month, I think the issue is it kind of continually feels like a video game where someone just presses reset at a certain point and you kick back to level one, and all the progress and all the things that are there are just gone. And I think, in a video game, that's okay because you have such fun experiencing it. With Batman, you get invested in these story arcs that have lasted, and then they just destroy everything. And it's like, okay, what was the point of that? I think they need to get to a place where you feel as a reader like, hey, some things are changing, things are different. He has a different role or a different something that he's doing. And the character can remain the same, but the circumstances around him should drastically change. If that means they take Wayne Enterprises for him and he has to live out of an apartment or something like that, do it. I don't necessarily think that's a good idea, but like, let's say they did that, then that should be permanent. It shouldn't be that, hey, 2 weeks later, he just finds millions of dollars, or he loses Wayne Enterprises and has to, through his own ingenuity, build a new company to build his resources back up, whatever it may be. But they need to do something to mark the character in terms of errors to have where it's like, hey, this is a different era of Batman storytelling. Yes, the character is the same, but these circumstances are different. And I think if they do that, it could get to where the books won't feel so similar. You'll get a little real variation in the comics, and you'll get something where fans are invested again. That would be what I would do to try to fix the Batman comics themselves, is addressing the character himself. As much as I think he's a great character, my favorite character of all time, I do think those things are a bit broken. And I think if DC Comics made a concerted effort to resolve those issues, it would help the books overall. Just one man's opinion, though. Let me know. What do you guys think down below? What would you do as far as with Batman as a character himself? How would you approach the character? Do you think there's things that are broken? Do you think they need to be fixed? Always interested in hearing your thoughts down below. As always, folks, thank you for watching. God bless you. We'll catch you in our next video.